And now the director of Sunseed the Journey and today's host, Amartat Cohen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amartat Cohen, director of the movie Sunseed the Journey. I want to welcome you all to the third of our Wisdom Talks series, interactive discussions inspired by the original movie Sunseed and its legacy, as well as the growing spiritual consciousness of our time. We have more exciting Sunseed events planned for you in the future and more wisdom talks. So if you're not on our mailing list, just go to our website and sign up your email address. The website is at sunseed.org, O-R-G. And while you're there, why not take a look at my movie? I know that you'll love it. Today, we are going to go direct to India. We are so fortunate to have a powerful, unique, lovely lady, Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati. Are you there? Oh my goodness. We're so thankful that you are joining us today. I know it's quite late at night for you out there in India. And I just want to also thank all of the people who've joined us. It's quite early in California or wherever they are in the world. We're going to spend about an hour together, and then we're going to have a chance to let the audience ask some questions of you, Sadhviji. And we're going to end, we have a great treat. At the end, we're going to have a meditation guided by Sadhviji. So be sure you all stay until the very end. This could be the highlight of your entire day, maybe your entire week. Sadhviji was actually born in Hollywood, California. And today she's living in Rishikesh, India, at the foot of the Himalayan mountains. She is staying at the Parmat Niketan ashram. She's been there for 24 years. She gives spiritual discourses, satsang, meditations, and she heads many great humanitarian projects, which hopefully we'll be able to talk about today. Sadhviji, what an incredible journey you have been on. It's amazing. Before we get into your story, perhaps you can share with us a moment of silence or a short meditation to put us in the right frame. Please.
It's so beautiful to be with you here this evening, or evening for us and morning for so many of you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I'll leave it to you.
As we'll end this with a longer meditation together, why don't we just begin with a moment of allowing ourselves to close our eyes and just really arrive in this moment. So many other items on our to-do list. So many other things calling us, even in this very moment. But we've made this conscious choice to be here, to be together, to dive deeply together into this beautiful moment of sharing, of togetherness, of love and inspiration. So let us take a moment and just fully arrive here with all of our mind, all of our heart, all of our attention and intention. Let us anchor ourselves in our own breath that is connected to each other's breath. Our own breath that is one with the universe, flowing in and through us. And then out of us, back into the universe. And through that breath, we connect. We connect within ourselves. And we connect to each other. And as we take these breaths, we are aware of the fullness of the moment. The abundance of that flowing into us and flowing through us. Anchored in that fullness, we come back together in this conversation.
Thank you for helping us all connect, even though we're now in the virtual space, all of us together. It's, it's one of the great blessings we have that we can share this around the world together, even separated by thousands of miles. I don't know where to start really with your story. It's just so incredible. I've listened to your TED Talks, and I really urge, and other interviews, I urge everyone to go to listen to your TED Talk, hear every detail. The TED Talk is called From Hollywood to Holywoods. Unbelievable.
A term coined by my guru, Puja Swamiji, actually.
Really?
From the beginning, it's what he's been saying. There was a film made about my story that he gave them that title, and then when I was going to do the TED Talk, he said, "This is what you should call it." So yeah, it's the beautiful way that he has shared from the beginning about that journey that I took.
Well, the journey, as I hear it, you were in graduate school at Stanford getting your Ph.D. You needed a break. You went with some friends to India. And really, you had no particular spiritual yearning at all. You were more interested in the vegetarian food, perhaps. But when you got to the Ganges River, something remarkable happened, totally unexpected. You found yourself in tears. You said that they were tears of truth, and that you had an encounter with the divine. And I know it's difficult to speak in words of something that's out of the world, but maybe you can share with us a little more what you mean by those words, and then what happened next on your journey.
Sure. Yeah, the words are always difficult. Almost 25 years later, I still have not found the appropriate semantic way of describing it. But that is why I always emphasize, and it's so deeply important to me to really emphasize to people, that grace doesn't discriminate. We hear so many stories of people who were devoutly spiritual, devoutly religious, deeply disciplined, had been praying and meditating and, yearning for enlightenment, yearning for a guru for so long, and saved up every penny or rupee or euro or whatever they had, and finally managed decades later to get to the banks of Ganga. And I would love it if that were my story, because it sounds so much more worthy. It sounds so much more like the story that, in retrospect, it seems that a spiritual person should have. There should be that level of quest, of yearning, of sort of knowing from the beginning that there's something that one is walking toward. But in all honesty, it's not my story. As you said, I was not someone who was religious. I grew up in a Reformed Jewish family. And so there was a lot of culture with regard to religion. And what I mean by that is that we went to synagogue, we celebrated holidays, but at least for me and in my family and in the way that I was brought up religiously, it wasn't about God. It was about the culture and the people and the ancestors and the tradition. And we went to synagogue because it mattered to my grandmother, not because you went to connect with God. The only spiritual experiences that I had had, which at the time I never would have even spoken about as a religious experience. It's only decades later, in retrospect, looking back and saying, oh yeah, that was spiritual experience, were the experiences that I had in nature, the experiences that I had in the mountains, or lying in the pine needles beneath the redwood trees. You know, I had lots and lots of those sorts of connected to the universe, connected to perfection, connected to oneness and allness and infinity in nature. But I never would have called it spiritual. I never would have spoken about God. There was no sense of I'm having a spiritual experience, so much as just whenever I was stressed or upset or finished final exams or had an evening off, it would find me, you know, across the Golden Gate Bridge in Muir Woods, lying in the pine needles, looking up at the redwoods. And so when I came to India, you got it right. I was not on a spiritual quest of any consciousness, meaning I wasn't aware that I was on the journey. I always had thought that spirituality was for people who really fit into a very clear framework. They were people who got up and they prayed to some concept of God, and maybe they chanted mantras or prayers or in some language or whatever. There was a very clear kind of cookie cutter concept of this is what spirituality is. This is what religion is. And it wasn't me. And so I had really just accepted that I was not a spiritual person, and that was all okay with me. And then when I came here, I stood on the banks of Ganga, of this sacred river, having gone down just because I was hot and wanted to put my feet in the river. Literally, that was what I had said, was just, you know, I'm hot, I'm going to go stick my feet in the river. And I got down to the banks of Ganga. And in that moment, it was like I was swept up energetically into a world, into a truth, into a place, into a state of divinity. It was as though I had a veil that was covering not just my eyes, but my entire way of knowing, my entire way of interacting with the world, of understanding myself, of understanding the world. And the whole veil was ripped off. And so none of the ways that I had of understanding worked anymore. None of the ways that I had of seeing worked anymore. But in that moment, it didn't matter. I mean, in that moment, there was no sense of, oh my God, nothing I thought actually is still true. It was more a moment of just, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And that was pretty much all I could say for a really long time. And so the fact that none of it made sense, only in retrospect, as I tell the story 25 years later, does it sound like there might have been a conflict. At the time, there was no conflict because it didn't matter. All that mattered was how beautiful it was. The fact that I didn't understand it, the fact that everything that I thought I knew no longer made sense, didn't matter. I literally had been swept up into a whole new way of seeing, of knowing, of understanding. And all that mattered was staying here, staying in this bliss. You know, one of the ways that I've described it over the years, which sounds like a bit of a funny analogy, but bear with me through it, is if your entire life you have thought that you had size 6 feet, and everybody that you've always ever known has told you from childhood that you have size 6 feet. And so you've always worn size 6 shoes. And in the beginning, maybe you said, these are a little tight, or these hurt a little, or it's pinching over here, or I can't really move over here. And people had said, oh, don't worry. That's what shoes are like. Now, they hadn't done that out of malice. No one was purposely trying to convince you. It was not some grand ruin your life conspiracy. They really, out of their hearts, out of their intentions, really deeply, honestly believed that your feet were size 6. And that's what shoes feel like. And so you wear those shoes, and the pinching and the squeezing, you kind of stop noticing it, because over the years you adapt. This is what shoes feel like. And then one day, someone sticks your feet into a size 8 pair of shoes. And you go, oh my God. So this is what shoes feel like. And then people start saying things to you like, but don't you miss those size 6 shoes? Like, don't you ever want to just put one on, for old time's sake, or just to, go back and experience that? And you think, why in the world would I ever want to try to squeeze my feet back into a size 6 shoe? Yes, sure, I managed for the years that I thought that was the right size. But now that I have found the right size, now that I have tasted and touched and walked in the right fitting shoes, why in the world would I miss what a size 6 shoe felt like? And that for me is what it's been like since I came.
I think many of the people watching and who saw my movie Sunseed are very much hoping, looking, I don't know what the right word is, to have this overwhelming type of experience you had. And as you said, people search, work, pray, chant, all these things for years, waiting for a moment of grace. And I guess my question is it just grace, chance, divine destiny, or is there actually something that we can do to realize this and then keep realizing it?
So grace is always there. Grace does not always just show up with a bang. It's like water. Sometimes you turn on the tap and the water flows normally. Sometimes if the pipes have been maybe, frozen all winter and it's your first time turning them back on after, being away all winter and they've frozen, you turn them on and the pipe goes and all of the water, comes out like that. But that's not necessarily either the only way for it to happen. It's also not necessarily, even on any kind of objective level, the best way for it to happen. In fact, for me, I think about it not so much as in, oh, I was more blessed than others, but I really think about it much more in that kind of frozen pipe analogy of I wasn't seeing grace. And that inner pipe was stuck in some way. And so in order to get that to flow, the universe literally had to, do this in order to finally clear that blockage so that that flow could happen. But people should never think that until they've had an experience like that they haven't experienced grace. That's the model, sadly, of sort of, unless it was something that was extraordinary, unless it was something that was romantic and volcanic, it didn't happen, or it's not worthy, or it's not the real thing, or it's not good enough. And grace is that which is there in every moment. And if I could get one message to people as you ask this, it would be, do not wait for that type of thing. Don't even pray for that type of thing, because that implies somehow that is an objectively better way for grace to enter your life. But instead, simply pray that in every moment, you can experience the presence of grace. That every time you turn on your tap and water flows out, that you can experience grace. That every time you stand in the shower and there's water flowing on you in that way, that you experience grace. That every time you walk outside and you see a flower opening its petals to the sun, that every time you see a sunset, a sunrise, a blade of grass, that every time you feel the wind blow across your face, or the sun, a ray of the sun touch some part of your skin, or look in the eyes of a loved one, or look in the eyes of a baby you've never met before, but feel that love. That in every moment, we can feel that. The dilemma is that most of the stories, the books, the stuff we hear is these types of experiences. And so other people think, if I haven't had it like that, I haven't really had it. And so we miss the opportunity to connect with grace in every moment. And as I said, grace doesn't discriminate, but it's going to touch you in a completely different way. It may touch you in a note of music. It may touch you in a drop of water. It may touch you in a different way, moment by moment. On the inhalation, on the exhalation. On the smelling of the flower as you walk by. In the blossoming of, a jasmine or a rose as you walk by and it fills you. All of this is the universe saying to us, hey, I'm here.
It's so beautiful and rich what you're sharing with us. And it's true, we tend to think that those experiences we hear about in books is what the objective is. And then, you got to this ashram and you were like another amazing experience. You were like frozen. You couldn't leave. You finally decided to stay, and it's been 24 years now. But it can't be, and then she lived happily ever after. You were from Palo Alto, California. You lived a very comfortable life, and now you're in India with the noise and the crowdedness and the sanitary problems and were you not sometimes saying, what am I doing here? I want to go home? Or was there any back and forth? What kept you there now for 24 years?
So, a couple of points. First of all, it would be really nice if the biggest problems to staying grounded and anchored and committed to a spiritual path were the trash in the streets or the noise from a highway. That's the external stuff. The greatest challenge to happily ever after, at least that I've experienced, has nothing to do with trash that someone else has left in a street or a car that's honking or something like that. The greatest challenge to happily ever after is the mind. And the mind, sadly, is there with you wherever you are. Happily when the mind is your friend, sadly when the mind isn't. But that's the work. Is it's not so much about, oh, let me get to a place where there isn't trash on the street, because, you know, it happens actually frequently here. It's funny. People will come and they'll say, oh God, you know, it's so loud, I can't meditate. And comparatively, Rishikesh is actually really quiet and peaceful compared to most other parts of India. But they'll come and they'll say, oh, you know, I can't meditate. And because, of course, there's also spiritual programs going on all day long and chants and things on loudspeakers and whatnot. And people will say, I can't meditate. And I'll ask them, where are you from? And they'll say something like, oh, Maine, or, oh, the south of England. And, you know, some place where there's 4 people per square kilometer or something like that. And I always say, wait, you came from Maine to India looking for a place to be quiet enough for you to meditate? If you can't meditate in a place with 4 people per square kilometer, clearly the problem is not the noise outside. And what India gives us is not the turn off the world so I can meditate. India gives us the ability to find an inner quiet. In fact, as you know, here the cow is considered holy, and it's considered holy for a lot of deep religious reasons within the Sanatan Dharma or Hindu Vedic tradition. But for me, on a personal level, the reason that I just adore and revere the cow is that she's this model for me of the most perfect embodiment of a spiritual being, because the cow is not stupid at all. Not a stupid animal, a very intelligent animal, very heightened senses. And the cow is able to just sit, sometimes nap, sometimes not nap, but just very calmly sit in the middle of traffic. No fear. She knows I'm holy. Nobody's going to hit me because then they're going to get lifetimes of bad karma. So this just incredible faith in the universe that even sitting in the midst of traffic, she's safe. All is well. All is good. She can close her eyes. I don't know what a normal resting pulse rate is for a cow, but whatever it is, I think she's got it even sitting in the middle of traffic. And that is really the embodiment of what we're looking for. So it's not that my mind has never said, what am I doing here? Of course it has. It's just that it's not because of trash on the road or, you know, honking scooters or cars. It's the games of the mind that always are rooted in this sense of lack. Something is missing. Something isn't enough. I'm not good enough. Who do I think I am to be a spiritual being? Who do I think I am to deserve this level of grace? I mean, there's all these games of the mind that are rooted in that sense of scarcity. Oh my God, I haven't made any money yet. You know, I mean, the mind plays all kinds of games. I wish it were only about, you know, crash in the road. So yeah, of course the mind plays games, but I, over these 24 years, have been blessed with a practice, not just the extraordinary arrival of the awareness of grace in my life, but a practice of watching the mind, of watching it play its games, of watching it recite scripts, playing roles, bringing back characters from shows that shut down decades ago, but kind of a revival series of shows that, you know, you thought were over such a long time ago, playing games in the mind. But you watch them. You just watch them. And then you don't act based on them. And then you re-anchor in truth, in awareness, in grace. So that it's not the mind says something and suddenly you jump. That the mind plays some script and suddenly you jump.
Also,
but you're able to just watch it.
Also, I think, you know, you had a spiritual guide. You took initiation with your guru, Swami Chidananda Saraswati, and this is probably you'll have to say, what was he like as a man, as a teacher, and maybe you have some experiences you had with him you can share how this changed you.
Well, he is the reason that I have the practice. He is the reason that I have the awareness. He is the reason that I'm able to have any of this, to sit, to watch it. He's an amazing guru, really an amazing guru. You know, it's funny because when you listen to him speak about his guru literally would slap him. I mean, one day he was slapped 21 times. And his guru made him stand on one leg 11 hours a day and beg for food. And I mean, really, really harsh sadhana and tapasya. Live in the Himalayan jungles without any blankets or shawls or even socks or sweaters or anything. And in many ways, he's the antithesis of that. He's sort of the kinder, gentler, tenderer guru. He's never slapped me once. He's never made me stand on one foot for hours at a time. But his approach, his way of teaching is very different. It's much more a gentle push into the direction that he knows you need to go. And so it's more a gentle guide of look over here, look over there. He slaps sometimes very, very gently with his words. I remember one time I had been here, I don't know, 9 months, 12 months, something like that. And some situation had arisen and I had lapsed back into old patterns of not being good enough, of fear, of separation, of all of that. And I had gone to him with it. And he looks at me and he says, "You are the stupidest smart person I've ever met." And just like that, stupidest smart person I've ever met. Here you are, he says, so smart, so intelligent. having had all of these divine experiences, and then you're ready to just throw it all away for some little game of the ego? And so that's the way that he teaches. He's also perfectly prepared to let you make your own mistakes if you don't necessarily want to do exactly what he says. I've had many examples of that, of him kind of suggesting a path, but my ego deciding that I knew best, and him blessing me and allowing me to walk the way of that mistake, and then being there to help me make sense of what went wrong. So it's a very, very powerful way, because it's so much easier if you had someone who literally would just slap you, because then I must be walking in a straight line until I get slapped. But here the slapping is much more metaphoric. I speak about it sometimes as being a piece of clay on a potter's wheel, where you're this lump of clay, and you get spun around and you get hit, and it's not always fun by any means, because a lot of times the ego, of course, does think it knows what's best, does think it knows what's right, and then you get that hit, and then you get thrown into this burning hot fire of a kiln, and it's hot. But at the end of the day, the presence of the Guru allows that lump of clay to actually become something that not only is beautiful, but that actually is useful. And so whether it's useful as a metaphoric teacup or a bowl or a vase or whatever you may have molded into, not only is it beautiful, but it's of use to the world. And so for me, the presence, his physical presence in his body, guiding me through his words, through his teachings, has been an extraordinary gift. I know people have gurus who are not in their bodies, and I can only imagine how difficult that must be, to figure out in your mind what's the voice of the guru not in his body speaking versus what's the voice of your own inner ego speaking. And for me, it's actually been very easy, because his voice is right there speaking. And it's been just an extraordinary blessing to allow myself to be molded, and then to be fired in the kiln, and to kind of watch, to watch what emerges without having had any awareness that actually was the shape that the lump of clay of me was actually supposed to be. I never could have imagined this is what was supposed to emerge from the clay of myself.
Yeah, I can't imagine you as a little girl in Hollywood imagining what all that's happened to you. But when you first became a sannyasi, it was not that common for a woman to be accepted into an order and become a renunciate. What was it like being a woman in this context, and how is it today?
I would love to say it's been like night and day over 25 years, but it hasn't. I'm not convinced that there are more women sannyasis today necessarily than there were 25 years ago. There may be, slightly. I haven't studied it, anthropologically, but what I can tell you is that 25 years ago, it was very rare. Today, it's very rare. There are specific orders and lineages that do have a lot of women. The traditional order of sannyas is not one of them. So yeah, it's still rare. It has not been easy by any means, but it's been really, really interesting on a lot of levels, because, you know, one of the core teachings of the Hindu tradition is you're not your body. I mean, the whole purpose for which we take birth, the whole core dharma for which we are here, is to recognize the divine within ourselves, that eternal divine that, as Lord Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita, isn't burned by fire, isn't cut with knives, isn't dried by the wind, isn't wet with water. So obviously is genderless. If it's never born and never dies, it doesn't have a size or a shape or a skin tone or a gender, doesn't have a socioeconomic status or a sexual orientation. I mean, it doesn't have any of that. And so being in both places simultaneously, both the acute awareness that I am a representative of that feminine energy, that feminine Shakti, that divine goddess, and that itself is a blessing and something not to ignore or deny or try to pretend doesn't exist, because to bring that presence of the Devi, of the Shakti, of the goddess is an incredible blessing. I mean, this is a culture that prays to the goddess, that worships the goddess. And so to be able to hold that awareness and that space, that here in this moment, on this stage or in this gathering, as the only female, as I very frequently am, I am holding that energy. And simultaneously, to not be attached to that, to not have my ego wrapped up in that, because then when there are moments or situations or circumstances in which there is very clear separation between the male and the female, along with very clear and subjective senses of better and not better, pure and impure, to then allow the identity to unhook itself from being the embodiment of that feminine energy and to rehook itself, to re-ground itself in the nameless, formless, genderless soul. And to be able to be fluid in both of those places, so that it's not about not embodying the divine feminine, not holding that with joy and pride and strength and presence, but also not having oneself wounded, not having an identity or an ego or an identification wounded, when there's a tradition that, yeah, does tend to still keep women separate or behind or on the sides or lower, and to be able to fluidly move between both of those places. And learning how to do that has been actually an extraordinary sadhana, and one that I feel very blessed to have had to have the opportunity to do. And if this were a situation where there were more women, where women were given much more of a place, I wouldn't have had to really find that find that inner sadhana. So I feel really, really blessed to actually have had to have that opportunity.
It'll be interesting to see over the next decades, how this is evolving. I'm sure it is. You've talked about being useful. And I'd like to think that the audience we have listening, and the people who watch my movie Sunseed the Journey, that they're on a spiritual path or found a spiritual part of themselves, working on themselves to be present in the now, as you started us off so beautifully doing with your meditation. But what actions can we take as a consciousness community? We're supposed to be able to take action in this world to stop the destruction that's happening to Mother Earth. As Greta Thunberg says, it's a time of crisis. So how can we, this community especially, live up to this challenge and help save the Earth, basically?
It's an extraordinary challenge at this moment because we're having to re-understand a lot of our spiritual traditions, because we've gone from a concept of, most of us from the West, we've gone on our spiritual trajectories from being fully engaged in society, in our academic lives, in our careers, in our consumerism, in our doingness, onto a spiritual path in which we learned to just stop and just be still and just witness and be aware. And that's very beautiful and very important. But that's not where we're supposed to end. And so now the very interesting challenge that we find ourselves facing is, oh, wait, what do you mean I'm now supposed to get up from the cushion? I'm supposed to go back into doing. I'm supposed to go back into action. And there's a lot of a pushback within the spiritual community, as though somehow simply sitting, simply being still is of a higher calling, without recognizing that the action, the doing that we do from a place of stillness, from a place of connection, from a place of inner meditation, is a completely different type of doing, a completely different type of engagement than who we were before we came onto the path. A lot of people feel like, oh my God, what do you mean I have to be engaged? That's what I used to do. And it was horrible. And then I found spirituality and now I'm finally in peace. What do you mean I have to act again? And they worry that they're going to lose that peace. And it's really important to realize no one's talking about going backward. We're talking about going forward. The Buddha left the city for the jungle, did the meditation, had the awakening, and then rose and went back into the cities, into the villages, teaching. But it wasn't a back in terms of his practice, it was a forward. It was a taking the awareness that he was given and then using that to act. And that today is what we are called upon to do. We must absolutely be sure, 200% sure, this is not a time for us just to sit and close our eyes and meditate and convince ourselves that's enough. Yes, we must meditate. We must have our meditation time of the day. And periodically, we must take more time, whether it's weekly, monthly, annually, whatever works in our retreating schedule, sure. But we must be engaged. This is a time for us in which we must take that peace, take that connection, take that awareness, take that knowing, and use it as the catalyst from which we serve. We cannot today consider ourselves spiritual people if we are sitting this one out. There is a destruction happening on the planet that is violence. And the very first yama, you look at the 8 limbs of yoga given to us by the sage Patanjali, begins with yam and niyam, or what we call the yamas and the niyamas colloquially. And the first yam is ahimsa, nonviolence. Ahimsa. It is the core, the foundation upon which a yogic path, a spiritual path, a dharmic path is rooted on. And so whether you consider yourself a yogi or a spiritual person or a dharmic person or a meditator, whatever words you use, ahimsa is the foundation. And violence is not only in acts of commission, it's also in acts of omission. And so I can be violent, of course, through my acts of commission, what I'm doing. But to stand back, to stand quietly, or to sit quietly with my eyes closed, while violence is being wrought upon our planet, upon our sisters and brothers with whom we share this planet, that is violence. It is violence through an act of omission. But I am culpable, just as if I had been the one to create this violence. And so whether it is that which is being done to our rainforests, that which is being done to our water, to our air, to our climate, that which is being done to our sisters and brothers across the world with regard to lack of water, lack of food, lack of health care, lack of human rights, lack of safety and security, that is violence. And every one of us who stands back in our bliss bubble, convincing ourselves that a perfect trikonasana is yoga, we are engaging in violence. And what that means is that every minute and every moment of our lives is an opportunity to engage in our spiritual practice. It means our spiritual practice is not just what we do on the cushion or on the mat. That's what you can consider the charging time. Like our mobile phones have to be plugged into the wall for a certain period of time each day to be charged. But then you unplug it and you take it with you into the world. That's its whole purpose. If it had to stay plugged in order to work, it wouldn't be a mobile phone. It would be a landline. That's what landlines did. They were plugged into the wall and you used them. What makes a mobile is it comes with you. And in the same way, we use our practice time to charge ourselves. But then the whole point is to then take that charge and to go out. And in every minute and every moment. And of course, each of us is going to serve differently. But every moment of our life must be a choice for not violence.
It's not the time
for truth.
It's not the time to sit this one out,
Absolutely.
right? As you said.
We cannot.
And just we've got so many people that want to ask you questions, but I do want to just go a little bit into what you're doing to your service. You have so many humanitarian efforts, but particularly I know you're very much involved with WASH, which brings together the different leaders of different world traditions to focus on a very important issue. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Then we'll take some questions because we want to know what we can do to help.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me take the two questions you just gave me out of order. Let me tell you first what you can do, and then I'll shift into what we're doing. As I was saying, every one of us in every moment can make a difference. Water is a core one. And it's core because it literally underlies, underscores everything that is happening in the world. Without water, there's no life. But water is that which is impacted by every choice we make. And so, for example, the trees store water, provide water. So as we cut down trees, we are literally contributing to water shortage. All of the pollution that we create, whether it's going up into the air as air pollution, or whether it's going out into our fields or our roads as just solid waste, ultimately it all ends up in the water. Whether it comes down with the rain, whether it ends up seeping into our groundwater and then our rivers, whether it's dumped into our oceans, ultimately everything ends up in the water. We know that without water, we cannot live. And we also know water is sort of these days the canary in the coal mine at this point, because we are less than 20 years away from having less than half the water that we need. According to the United Nations, by 2040, the world will only have half the water it needs. India is on track to be there by 2030, which is basically tomorrow. Last year, this time, Chennai, the 6th biggest city of India, ran out of water. They were trucking in water. It's happened in South Africa. It's happened in Sao Paulo. The dominoes slowly are falling in cities all over the world. And of course, when we speak about having half the water we need, we know, those of us who have had our eyes open, we know that it doesn't mean that every one of us is simply going to have 50% of the water we need. What it's going to mean is that a tiny, tiny percentage of people are going to still have access to all the water they need. And a huge percentage of people, well over 50%, will barely have access to water at all. However, every one of us, every minute of our day has the opportunity to actually make a difference here. And one of the core ways, or two core ways, have to do with what we eat and what we buy. And so the meat industry, animal agriculture, our hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken McNuggets, are one of the core contributors to everything that is going wrong with our environment. The United Nations actually put out a report called Livestock's Long Shadow that explained how animal agriculture was the single greatest contributor to climate change. The amount of water, just to give you one statistic, so I don't use up our whole question answer time talking about this, but one statistic, the amount of water that goes into the production of one meal of beef. One meal of beef. The amount of water that goes into that is the same amount of water you use if you bathe every day for 6 months. And if you bathe not the way we do in India out of one bucket, but if you bathe, the Western way with a shower head and you turn it on and the water pours on us, 8 minutes a day, every day, 6 months, you will use approximately 2,500 gallons, approximately roughly 10,000 liters of water. That's about the amount of water that goes into the production of that one meal of beef, which means if you are committed to eating beef, are you prepared to refrain from bathing for 6 months to offset the water usage? And if not, and if you deeply consider yourself a spiritual person, then here is a question to ask yourself in your meditation. Why? Why do I believe that I am entitled to use up the water of the world? Why am I more entitled to water than others? Similarly with food, tens of thousands of children are dying of starvation every single day. The amount of grain that we produce every year could feed 10 billion people. There's only 7-point-something billion people on Earth. The reason that almost 1 billion people sleep hungry every night and tens of thousands are dying of starvation is that the grain is being cycled through the livestock industry. So the grain is being fed to cows, to pigs, to chickens, who live, who digest, who poop, who eventually years later are killed for a little bit of meat. But all of that grain has been wasted. And so it takes 16 times as much grain to produce 1 pound of meat from 1 pound of bread. So if we have 16 pounds of wheat, of rice, of corn, of soy, we can either produce 16 pounds of pasta, of bread, of chapatis, of rice, or we can produce 1 pound of meat, which again, from a deeply spiritual perspective of non-violence, of truthfulness, of non-stealing, non-hoarding, these yamas again, we have to ask ourselves, according to what scripture, according to what sutra or what mantra, what teaching, what guru, do I believe that I am entitled to the food of 15 other people? Where is it written that those of you with the luxury to choose are given the right to choose in such a way that you are consuming the bread of life, literally, of 15 other people? And so every minute that we eat food, we have the opportunity to choose for a sustainable planet. Everything we buy, we have the opportunity to buy organic and fair trade. Instead of buying just that which is cheaper, can we actually look at which companies are producing things in such a way that they are polluting the groundwater, polluting the air, polluting the soil, or producing cheap items because they're working women and children in sweatshops that are threatening their health, or producing things with such toxic chemicals that the farmers are getting cancer and their children have birth defects. Everything we buy, we have an opportunity to choose. It doesn't mean thou shalt never buy anything. It just means be conscious. And ultimately, that spiritually is what's most important. Consciousness, mindfulness, awareness, not just in our meditation, but when we go to the supermarket, when we go to a restaurant, when we order on Amazon or order anywhere, or go into a department store. Everything we buy has a history, has a ripple impact on the world. And we have the power to choose for nonviolence, for sustainability, for health. And so spiritually, we are being called to wake up, to open our eyes, to stop moving through the world as numbed out zombies. And to actually
Thank you.
choose consciously, to live consciously. And it's exciting. This is not about feeling guilty. This is about regaining our power, regaining our mindfulness, regaining our minds back from all of the distractions, from all of the brainwashing that has happened to us through the media, through culture, through our distractions, that has made us think we are helpless pawns in a society. There's nothing we can do, so we might as well just, eat chocolate cake and have shopping therapy. Spirituality says no. As you think, so you create. As we are thinking in our minds, so we are creating in the world. And so as we change our thought, we change the world.
We have a huge responsibility right now.
I know you asked also about what we're doing. So just really quickly, people, of course, can go online and can see all about it. But really, in a little nutshell, on a spiritual level, Puja Swamiji's teaching is that we are one with the universe. That same divine to whom we pray in our places of worship lives in the trees, in the rivers, in our sisters and brothers of every color, of every race, of every religion, of every species. And so in the same way that we serve ourselves, we serve the world. And so we're engaged in a whole variety of programs and projects for education, free education, for girls, for women empowerment programs, vocational training programs, environmental protection programs, tree plantation programs, a lot of awareness raising programs. And of course, as you mentioned, our program for WASH means water, sanitation, and hygiene. And I've shared about water. What we've been doing is bringing religious leaders together because diarrhea doesn't discriminate. Toxicity doesn't discriminate. We've seen COVID doesn't discriminate. And so in the same way that the ramifications of lack of water, of polluted water, don't discriminate, in the same way, we need to come together across all of the borders and boundaries of religion, of race, of color, and serve to protect our water, to protect our land, our soil, our air, to protect our future. Because our future is one. There's not a Hindu future and a Muslim future and a Jewish future and a Christian future and an atheist future. There's not an American future or an Indian future or a British future or a black future or a white future. There's one future. And together, therefore, we need to work and to serve. So we've been bringing people together, to work together, to serve together, to care together, to be part of the solution.
I love the way you bring.
Just lastly, as I said, people can go online and can see all about these. I assume that in the text that you've got going with this, there are links to websites, and you don't need me to give them out. If you do, I will. But I'm assuming that there's text that people are seeing.
We'll be sure to put it in there.
Online and get there.
We're now starting a bi-weekly newsletter. We'll be sure to put you know, how to connect and contribute to WASH or other initiatives that you're doing. I love
I can't
the way
hear
that
you.
you
I
bring
don't know if you're
down.
muted or
Can you hear me
my
now?
mic is off. Just
You're
one
fine.
second.
We hear you great. Can you hear me? Yes? You hear me, Marcus? Are we okay? I hope so. So now I guess we get to take some questions from the audience. You know, even on our website, we are trying to, we have a guru shop where we're giving sustainable clothing. We're trying to look at everything that comes in that it creates less damage to the, or no damage to our earth. Are you ready to take some questions? Marcus, do you have, what's our first question? Let me see if I can read it here. Oh my gosh, it's a small question. Let's see. I have to make my screen bigger. Excuse me for 1 second. I'm going to do that. Okay. This is a question. I'm regularly experiencing fear that the old shoes are the right shoes. Hearing the old voices warning me that my new shoes are not safe, not correct. How can I continue to move towards peace in this area? I crave an acceleration. I crave an acceleration in this healing process.
Beautiful. The key is faith. You have to have faith. You have to understand and know, not just intellectually, but know in your heart that there is an intelligence in the universe. And it pervades all of creation. It flows through all of us. And that intelligence is working for you. And if you don't have that faith, just watch nature for a little bit. Watch, for example, caterpillars climb trees to weave cocoons and become butterflies. Watch butterflies poke out of a cocoon and jump and be able to fly. Watch baby birds jump out of the nest and learn how to fly. There's an intelligence that shows them how to do that. Watch a seed sprout and blossom and become a tree. How does it know how to do that? Watch a dog or a cat chase a bird up onto the roof, and then the bird flies off. But the dog or the cat doesn't. There is somehow this inherent intelligence within it that has made it chase the bird up there to the top. But the minute that the bird jumps off, it knows, I don't have wings, I'm not a bird. I've never seen a dog leap off a roof chasing a bird because it thought that it also had wings and it could fly. There's this incredible intelligence in the universe. All of nature is pervaded by it. Everything in nature has exactly what it needs. I mean, how do squirrels know to get all of what they need to store for the winter? How do bears know to make the dens to hibernate? And how does nature know what to do? There's an intelligence. And so we have to have faith in that intelligence, that it is inconceivable that the universe would have put an intelligence into a seed, into a caterpillar, that it didn't put into you. And so if there is an intelligence within you that is saying, these are the right shoes, climb the tree, weave the cocoon, burst forth, you can fly. To know that that intelligence is working for you. But you have to have faith. If the caterpillar never climbed the tree because it was too scared, it would miss the chance to become the butterfly. So you've got to have that faith.
Your message is so rooted in nature. You can see how you've spent so much time getting your inspiration from nature. I love your way of bringing everything down. Last question. This is from the World Dream Fund. World Dream Fund. How do we help our children find grace and live a loving life? How do we encourage them to help our dying and endangered world?
The best thing we as the elders, the parents, the teachers, the mentors can do today is actually let go of our own agenda and our own way. Because clearly whatever we have done has messed things up really badly. But the instinct is to make our children be like us. We resist change. So we resist change in even textbooks, in our educational systems. We resist all forms of change. Our children should be like us. Their classrooms should look like our classrooms. Everything should be the same. Well, if everything is the same, then we're just going to keep plummeting into destruction. Until and unless we as the elders of the society have the courage to look at ourselves and say, you know what? We did the best we could with the toolkits we had. We weren't purposely malicious. But we didn't really have it all exactly right. We allowed our egos to pull us a little too much. We allowed ourselves to be a little bit too much indoctrinated. And of course, you can look at this in a very interesting kind of sociological way of different generations, sort of, you know, from baby boomer generations, what they went through, then of course, what they taught to their children. And, you know, we can look at it in a way that's interesting historically to understand why we became so anti-establishment, anti-rules, kind of whatever I want, whenever I want it, however I want it. How it then became kind of all about me. How that all about meanness led us into this consumption era, this idea of somehow more is better. Mm-hmm. Industry, technology, the smokestack of a factory that first was this symbol of prosperity.
True.
But we held on to that symbol a little too long. For too many generations, the elders were unwilling to let go of the symbol of the smokestack as progress, as security, as development, as prosperity. Each generation has been a little bit too reluctant to let go of their way. And we now find ourselves, and of course, every generation has said, I don't want to clean up your mess. It's the same thing that we're seeing with, you know, the Paris Accords. The developing nations are saying to the developed nations, no, we're not going to cut down on fossil fuels. You know, hell with you guys. You've gotten yourself developed by using fossil fuels. First, let us get ourselves to the level where you are, and then we can have a conversation about cleaner forms of energy. First, let us get what we want, what you have, what we crave. First, let us, you know, bridge this gap of prosperity, of development. Don't tell us what to do. Don't look down upon us. We're going to do whatever we want. In many cases and in many ways, the developing nations today are acting very much the way that generations tend to, of sort of, don't tell me what to do. You've made this mess. Don't expect me to clean it up. But now what we're seeing is something very interesting in the youth today. The youth today are very awake. The youth today are very conscious and actually are very aware of the problems that we have created and the solutions. When they're not brainwashed and indoctrinated into the systems that led to these problems, the answers are very clear. But you have to be looking at the system from outside, which our youth are able to do. And so really the best thing I think that we can do for them is for us to have the humility to let them do it. For us to really have that courage to be able to look back on our lives, on our systems, and to say, you know, we really screwed up. You know, we didn't do it on purpose. We were scared. We were living in an illusion of lack. We were doing the best we could, but we went in the wrong direction a lot of ways. Mahatma Gandhi said so beautifully, what's the point of going so fast when you're going in the wrong direction? And I think it really requires a lot of us to stop and to say, okay, we realize this has been in the wrong direction. And to have that courage, and especially with our education systems, to have the ability to give our children an education that isn't about molding them into the ability to become us, that isn't about the ability to create more and more smokestacks, that isn't about the ability to just make things faster, 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 but actually a system of education that teaches our children to be connected to the flow of grace within them. Because the needs of our world are changing faster than our textbooks can keep up. The most important thing we can teach the youth is to be deeply connected to their inner wisdom, so that whatever the world needs as they're moving through the world, they're able to find that wisdom from within, and they're able to trust it. We don't need to make cookie cutters. We don't need to make robots. Artificial intelligence is already giving us robots. Robots are already going to be able to do everything robots can do. Our living, breathing human children need to not be turned into robots, but they need to be given the encouragement, the tools to connect themselves to grace, to connect themselves to Mother Earth, to connect themselves to their global family, to connect to their inner wisdom, their inner truth, their inner compassion. When our children cry, walking by homeless people on the street, we need to not say to them, that's just the way it is. We need to make them understand their tears are the exact right reaction, so that with those tears, they may develop a solution that we, in our ability to look the other way and to say that's just how things are, that we haven't been able to develop a solution. But that takes a lot of humility and a lot of courage within us. Because if we've stopped crying, when we walk by homeless people. Our children's tears are a mirror in our face of where we've lost our humanity, where we've lost our hearts. And we need to not be afraid to face that. We need to not try to mold our children into numbed and distracted beings in order to make ourselves feel okay about being numbed and distracted.
It's almost like we've come a full circle from the tears of truth to the tears of truth in a different way. I know you've opened my heart and opened my mind to things that, yes, I've thought about, but you put it all into a package of a huge context. I wish we had another hour. I've got some more lovely things to talk about, but now I think it's time maybe we should turn off our minds and go into that other space that I know that you can take us into to carry us further. So I'm going to turn the questions off and go into the silence or wherever you take us together. Thank you.
Let's allow our eyes to close. And as the eyes close, allow yourself to pull all of your awareness inward. Pull the attention, the sensation, draw it all inward. Take a moment and just allow the awareness to flow through the physical body. And as the awareness flows through the energy of the physical body, allow yourself to notice if there's anywhere you're holding tension. Is there anywhere in the body that seems constricted, tight? Any place where the energy doesn't flow? And as you notice it, don't judge it or condemn it. Don't even try to change it. But simply allow the awareness to flow gently into that space. Allow the breath, carried by the awareness, to flow into those spaces. Notice particularly around the area of the stomach and the abdomen. Notice around the eyes, the forehead, notice the jaw, the neck and shoulders. And just allow the awareness to flow, carried by the breath, into all of these spaces. And as you inhale, and that breath flows in and through the being, notice that on the breath, there's also light. Not a light like a flashlight, but just a beautiful luminosity that comes into you as you breathe in. And it flows in and through every cell of the being. And on the exhalation, allow yourself to release and let go all of that which is causing the tightness, the constriction, the blockages. Those thoughts in physical form, the emotions in physical form gripping different parts of the body. As you exhale, let it go. Let go of all of the masks that you wear. Let go of the roles that you play. Let go of the attachments to the universe behaving in a certain way. Let go of the grudges. Let go of the history. All of that which is constricting the physical and energetic body. And which is keeping the mind from being able to merge into the breath. Just release it. Exhale and let it go. And notice how with each exhalation as you let go, there's more space created inside. So that on each inhalation, the breath and the awareness have more and more space, more and more spaciousness to flow into. Make sure to hold the physical body in your whatever posture you're sitting in. Just make sure, to the extent possible, not to move. Don't wiggle or fidget. Allow all of the awareness to be with the breath. Because when the body moves, automatically the awareness moves with it. So keeping the body still, allow that awareness to be merged fully in the breath. Flowing in with luminosity, with a light that enters and touches and fills all of the cells within. And that fills even the energetic body into all the energy. And even the space between whirling electrons. The space within each atom. Allow the awareness aware the breath and the light to flow even into that space. If the mind wanders, don't worry. Don't yell at it or analyze it. Just gently bring it back. Gently bring it back to the breath. And as you're breathing, inhaling from the outside to the inside, and exhaling from the inside to the outside, notice as the awareness becomes very subtle. Notice that the border between inside and outside starts to dissolve. Notice as you breathe that slowly that border is disappearing. There's no longer an inner and an outer. There's just breathing and pure awareness. You can add a very gentle mantra to this. You can chant so on the inhalation and hum on the exhalation silently to yourself. So hum. It means I am that. I am one with the universe. I am the creator. I am the creation. I am that. So you can chant that silently with the inhalation and exhalation, with that awareness. The breath is flowing from self to self. No inside, no outside. Just the flow of the breath in pure, spacious awareness of the breath and the presence. Gently bring the palms together at chest level. Gently rub the palms against each other. Press the palms of your hands into your closed eyes. Slowly and gently open the eyes into the palms of your hands and lower your hands. hold that awareness as you move through your evening if you're here in India with us, or your day if you're in other parts of the world. Hold that awareness as you move through the world. As is the inside, so is the outside. This border and this boundary is just an illusion. Just an illusion of attention. And with proper attention, that border can dissolve. Move through the world with the awareness of that oneness.
Thank you again and again, Sadhvi Ji, for the precious time we've shared together. We're going to share this entire discussion and practice and meditation again on our website, sunseed.org. It'll also be on YouTube, on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. So feel free to share it with people who were not able to join us. And, you know, I want to look at it again. I really want to.
You can also join us, by the way. We're doing,
please,
on the banks of Mother Ganga, we're doing live meditation here and live satsang in the evening, where it's a little bit earlier than it is now. And so actually I do it right over the banks of Ganga with the sun setting into the waters of Mother Ganga just behind us. And so we do that at 6:30 each evening here, India time, which is 6 a.m. in California. But even if people join in later on our Facebook page, so if people want more of the meditations or more of the questions and answers, or if there are questions that we didn't have a chance to get to tonight, if people want to send them in, we can take them in the future in upcoming satsangs.
Yeah, can you give us your website just so everyone can note it down?
Sure. So, well, the website,
or the page, whatever.
My website is sadhviji.org, but the live streams go actually on Facebook. They can see it on my Facebook page, which is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, or on our Paramarth Niketan Facebook page. It's actually on both of them. So yeah, those are live, but then of course they stay there. So for people who are sadhaks and early risers, to join us at 6 a.m. California time, or 9 if you're in New York.
I don't know if you can, but maybe we'll send you some of the questions and you maybe
sure, of course,
do them
absolutely.
there, or do it and give us the video back. We can put on our site.
We can do both. We can do them as part of the live satsang, and then our team can also send the videos back to you.
Great, wonderful. And just to remind people, if they haven't yet seen Sunseed the Journey, please go to sunseed.org. I think you saw just recently part of it, at least, yes? We
Yes.
captured a special moment in time that's exploding today.
Yes, it's very beautiful.
Thank you.
Very beautiful, very inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, you were basically born about the time the
yes,
movie
I was
first
thinking
came
that.
out.
I was thinking that exactly.
And I filmed in Rishikesh. I remember walking by actually the ashram I think that you're at today, but it's changed a lot, Rishikesh.
Yes, it has.
Well, that's all, folks. Good afternoon, good night, good morning, wherever you are. May you all be blessed. Namaste. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Ram Om. May the long time sun shine upon you.